Right. Frank.
Yes, Samson, thank you very much. And a good morning once again to your esteemed viewers, listeners, and the generality of all Ghanaians. Yeah, Samson, we are in very difficult and challenged times, and one will have wished that we were not, to borrow the esteemed language of my senior Fareboa, we were not in this caboodle. I just had a little chat with Inusa before we came to the studio, and you see something, it's not the removal per se of a Chief Justice which is the problem for me, because it's a constitutional structure. I mean, it is founded under Article 146 of the 1992 Constitution. So if that is being exercised by citizens of this country, that there's a basis for the removal of a chief judge, it should not be too much of a heightened problem to me, because this is not the first time that petitions have been forwarded to the presidency for the removal of a sitting Chief Justice. Quite recently, Professor Kuazas sent a petition. The petition was roundly dismissed. It was found out that there was no prima facie case for the determination of the removal of the Chief Justice. So the Constitution permits it, but it's the way and manner the whole process has been skewed, handled, and perhaps manipulated by partisan political considerations. That is where, for me, the problem is. And in our political democratic dispensation, the only time that a sitting Chief Justice was attempted, there was a veiled attempt to remove a sitting Chief Justice, but it didn't work. That was Justice Fred Apalu. Otherwise, the Chief Justices who were removed from office, we all know the circumstances and situations under which they were removed. It was all military government. Akukosa, and I think, was it Charles Bannerman or one of them? Two of them were removed by military dictators. So that, for me, is the aberration. But in a constitutional setting, if the processes are followed through and there is a valid case for the removal of a Chief Justice, I mean, who can quarrel against it? But when the issues are so muddied and there's a persistent refrain by people who should know better, that is where the worry is. I have listened to an interview granted by the Deputy General Secretary of the NDC, Mustafa Gbandi. Well, he has not come out to disassociate himself from that interview. So I take it that as of this morning, that is what his take is on the removal of the Chief Justice, per se. And the kind of language that he used, I mean, for me, for a Deputy General Secretary of a ruling party and a sitting government, it's troubling. You know, he goes on to make a definitive pronouncement that this Chief Justice will go. After that, it will be the Electoral Commissioner and other heads of independent institutions in the country. I mean, I think it is needless. It is so needless. And that apart from these petitions, these 3 petitions that we have been told of, there are a load of others coming. I mean, who actually has been feeding him with this information? And how did he get to know that other persons were bringing petitions for the removal? Why is it stage managed? And for me, a Deputy General Secretary of the NDC should not be talking this way, because it fuels the atmosphere and it gives other people the opportunity to also make statements which otherwise they would not have made.
He spoke yesterday.
Yeah, was it yesterday? Yes. And now, with the greatest respect, I say this with a lot of pain, but the national chairman of NDC, Ibn Ketia, was also on radio. And, you know, statements like we need to reset the country and we should start with the judiciary and then we go to the Electoral Commission. And what is that supposed to mean? Because if the national chairman of the NDC is also in active cahoots, in active support of this refrain, what is being reset? Or what is being reset? Look, it is just an incident of political history that I guess in the last 5 Chief Justices that we have had, Justice George Kingsley Akwa, Georgina Wood, Sophia Akufu, the Wood. Oh, but I guess if I say Justice George Kingsley Akwa and I say it comes to please. I don't think we are here for that. We are the Chief Justices we have had. Chief Justice Kingsley Akwa, Mrs. Georgina Wood, Madam Sophia Akufu, Enini Yeboah, and Mrs. Gertrude Toko. Well, by incidents of political history, I mean, all these justices were justices who were appointed by the NPP government. But it's not something that anyone could have anticipated. But that is what happened. And can we say that these justices of the Supreme Court and Chief Justices have not distinguished themselves creditably? You see, when decisions are handed in court, we look at the basis of the decisions and make a critique of the decisions. But if because a Chief Justice has been appointed by a ruling government and decisions are handed, then it means that that Chief Justice is politically inclined. I found no merit in that reasoning. And what is the basis, some of the basis, the things that people have said loudly about why this present CJ should be removed, that they refer to the unanimous decisions in the 2020 presidential election petition. But come on, she wasn't even the Chief Justice at the time. The Chief Justice was Enini Yeboah. She was only a panel member of the constituted bench of the Supreme Court, which had the petition. So how can you hang that on her and say that because of that she should be removed and that the judiciary should be sanitized? In what way or manner? In any event, we are all students of the law. Some say you are a trained lawyer. I'm a trained lawyer. Inusa is a trained lawyer. Gloria is a trained lawyer. Bobby is a trained lawyer. Fortunately, all of us here are lawyers. Now, maybe people will say I'm speaking from a point of prejudice, but I always speak my mind as a trained lawyer. As I'm saying, I mean, it is not for glorification, but you know my stance on certain discussions we have had, both on radio and privately. And I don't mince words when I know what is happening. Does not sit with me. But
that's right.
But please, let's be cautious. Because if we take a systemic and determined attempt to destroy our institutions of state, it is the country that will suffer. We have the executive, we have the judiciary, we have the legislature. Let us maintain this separate, distinct arms of government and let them all do their work independently. Now, a typical case of this 2020 election petition, which has generated this fury and this unanimous 9 or 7, whatever people are saying. Some say, between us all here as trained lawyers, is it mandatory for any defendant to open his or her defense in a case?
We have gone beyond it. I don't know why sometimes, I'm tempted, sometimes why the politicians, even those who are lawyers, they turn the law upside down.
mean, is it...
It's not mandatory.
Is it mandatory for a defendant in a case, both civil and criminal, is it even mandatory, even with a criminal trial, where you suffer the penalty of imprisonment, a fine, or sometimes you are hanged or you are jailed for life? It is not mandatory that the accused person should open his defense or her defense. It is the burden of the prosecution to prove the guilt of the accused person beyond all reasonable doubts. In a civil trial, it is the burden of the plaintiff to prove beyond the preponderance of probabilities that you have made out a case. If the defendant elects that, look, I'm not going to say anything, I'm going to rely on my statement of defense, what can be so nauseating? What can be so bad about it?
In fact, in a civil matter, that statement of defense will be struck off.
I mean,
and then
and that is used as a weapon. And sometimes this is found by lawyers. Come on. You know, now...
There was a suggestion that this was some sort of sui generis of a matter that the EC at least should get in the box.
Oh, Samson. Samson. There is no bar to civil responsibilities in a civil trial, no matter how sui generis the matter is. You cannot change civil procedure. You cannot change the rules and orders of court. If it is A, it is A. We don't skew because it's sui generis. In any event, something. Aside of the CJ, we also had indication that the petition had been forwarded for the removal of Justice Scott Porman by another citizen of the Republic. Just a day or two ago, I heard that petition has been withdrawn. What does it make of it? Quietly, that matter has been determined. If the petition is withdrawn, it's gone. But did we hear the cacophony of noises which have been made in respect of Georgina Wood? She's been given the petition. She submitted a response. And we are waiting for what would happen. I beg and plead with all Ghanaians, and the political actors especially, that we should refrain from making judgmental and prejudicial comments. It does not help the narrative. It does not help the discussion. Now, before I leave this space, Samson, why is it that sometimes we pick and choose? When it is good for us, then all is well. And when it's not good for us, then it is inevitably bad. We're all in this country. There was a very high-profile criminal trial involving Atuforsen and Richard Japa about causing financial loss to the state. The lawyers for the two accused persons, of course, the third one was discharged on medical grounds, lodged an appeal in the Court of Appeal. There was a 2-1 verdict in the Court of Appeal. And Atuforsen and Richard Japa were acquitted and discharged. What does that make of our judiciary? And what does that make of the Court of Appeal? That the two justices, Justice Bright Mensah J.A. and Akabuafo, who were in the majority in that decision, are pliant NDC judges. I mean, you see, when we do some of these things, it becomes laughable. So it means Akabuafo and Justice Bright Mensah are NDC judge acolytes. So they decided that they will acquit and discharge Atuforsen and Japa. But these are justices who are appointed by sitting presidents. Akabuafo was appointed by President Akufo-Addo. Bright Mensah was appointed during the tenure of the MPP government. So the other justice, Opukwa Champon, was also appointed in the NDC, in the MPP regime. So then what makes of the other two justices?
He moved from Judicial Secretary to
From
Court of
Judicial
Appeal.
Secretary to the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
So what makes of them? The two of them are NDC
So
judge acolytes.
catch your breath.
Come on.
And then